Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Julia Poger, and I am a business, conference, and diplomatic interpreter. I work from Russian and French into English, and from English into Russian. And as you probably already know, I also run a business called Know Your Worth, a seminar by Julia Poger. And this particular business helps interpreters and really, quite frankly, any service professional understand how to get your name out there, how to sell your services so that you can work at the fees that you want and under the conditions that you want. Please write in the comments where you're listening in from today. And I know that the broadcast goes out about 15 seconds, or I say things about 15 seconds before you start commenting. So I may have to wait a little bit before I start showing where people are coming in from. Before we move into our topic today, I'd like to ask you to stick around until the end so that you can find out what I'll be talking about in March, and in fact, who my guest will be, because I won't be alone. So, on to today's topic, which, as you know, is mindset. And frankly, I should actually have called it mindsets in the plural, because there are so many different kinds of mindsets out there. I don't have enough time to help you with every different mindset that's out there. And as you already probably know, the right mindset definitely will help you throughout your life. There are so many valuable ones out there that have been covered by others. For example, if you happened to attend Sophie Llewellyn-Smith's TerpSummit in January, we heard about the mindset of abundance, the mindset of self-compassion, and also the mindset of coopetition. Today, I'd like to talk briefly about 5 different types of mindset that I think will really affect our work and our business. And I'd love to just say hi to people who are here from Spain, from the Canaries, from Helsinki, from Athens, Italy, and oh my gosh, London, Tunis. Okay, I'm gonna have to stop now. Otherwise we just won't finish the show. So I'm really glad to see all of you, and this is fantastic. So first of all, I'd like to talk to you about various types of mindset. And the first one is the growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Now, I know you've heard about this one before. So I'm not going to go into great detail about it. However, in the comments below this, I will include a link to a fantastic talk on growth versus fixed mindset that was given by my sweetheart, Guichot of Fortis, during last year's TerpSummit. Sophie Llewellyn-Smith was kind enough to allow us to take it out from behind the paywall because it's such a valuable talk. So I'm not going to go into all of the details that he could have gone into, but let me just give you a little bit of an idea of what it means. So the growth mindset and the fixed mindset are things that will affect your entire life. The fixed mindset is the one that says, oh, I don't know how to do this, and I will never know how to do this. This is a little bit like me saying, which I do actually, that I'm no good at math. And I'm no good at math. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, if I wanted to get out there and start reading up on math and studying on math and really focusing on it, I would get good at math, but I don't want to. So I've decided that's going to be my fixed mindset. On the other hand, if I ever needed proof that that's not actually a fixed thing, when I used to work in stores and would actually take cash way back when, I never made a mistake on giving back change. So obviously I'm not that bad at math, but that's the story I tell myself. The growth mindset is the one where you realize that you don't know everything. You know you'll never know everything, but if you need to know it, you know that you can find out about it. So for example, I didn't know how to live stream on LinkedIn. Did I want to? I wasn't sure, but I thought, wow, what a great tool. And maybe I could use it for other reasons. And so what did I do? I took a class and then I practiced. Actually, I practiced on your backs a bit because my very first one was the very first time I went online. And this is something like the sixth one, I think, or the fifth one. So I think things have been going all right. So you can change your mindset. You can change your knowledge and so on. And we all showed signs of growth mindset when, for example, COVID hit and we all had to pivot to remote interpreting. A lot of us had never done that before, but now we know how. Now we know about cameras for streaming. We know about microphones for sounding good. We know about earphones and headphones and what we should use because we have this growth mindset. And quite frankly, I think I'm preaching to the choir because most of you, if you're listening to me now, probably have one. One other little thing that I'd like to say about this is the whole point of continuing professional development, continuing education, or as I'll call it, CPD. CPD is so important for helping us to keep our mindsets flexible and growing. And you can take classes on anything. You can take classes on interpreting skills, more on that later. You can take classes on business skills, on streaming skills, and so on and so forth. So CPD is huge. Gosh, I'm really pleased. I'm just seeing a few more people who've come in. So let me just say hi from London, as I think we've already seen, Vancouver, and the First Nations in Toronto. This is great. And this person who I'm going to mention later and whose name I cannot pronounce. So, forgive me later. And hello, Manuela, as well. Great. So, and hello to anybody who's watching this on replay, quite frankly. All right, so that was the first mindset that I wanted to talk about. The second mindset is what I call, and all of these are mindsets that I've kind of made up the name of. There's so many of them out there, and I could talk about so many other ones, but these are the ones I think that we really have to focus on. So this one I call the freelancer mindset. And this is the one that is shown when you talk about you, when you're just thinking all about yourself. So that's always an issue with all of us. So if it's all about you, then it's all about you, and that's it. And you are the center of your world, as quite frankly it should be. I am the center of my world, you are the center of your world. But that doesn't mean that you have to take that out into the world. So for example, one aspect of the freelancer mindset is the one where let's pretend you get work 365 days of the year. You're still going to be pissed off because somebody else was offered a job that you were not offered. This is one of the sadder aspects of freelance mindset. Another part of freelance mindset, and this is the one that's really self-destructive, is the one where you've had a decent relationship with somebody. Maybe it's an agency owner, maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's a client, and they're just not calling you for work. And suddenly you're thinking, oh my God, I did something wrong. Oh my God, it's all about me, right? I did something wrong. I offended them. I didn't do a good job. Why aren't they calling me, right? But there could be so many different reasons why they're not calling you. And if you'd like to put a few into the comments, I would love to see what you guys think. In the meantime, I'll continue with an example because, as I said before, there's about a 15-second gap. So an example from my own life, I was working for a specific client and in fact, a consultant interpreter who had hired me to do this particular job. And I did it for a couple, 3 years. The last year that I did the job, stupidly, I ate fish from the buffet and I got food poisoning. And I was sick for about the next 24 hours. Now, my client, i.e. the other interpreter in the booth, one of the other interpreters in the booth with me, was really nervous that I was not going to be able to do my half hours in the booth. Whereas I knew that I could do my half hours in the booth as long as I could zip out really fast afterwards. So I did that and it was fine. But the next year I didn't get a call and I didn't get hired. And I thought, oh my God, obviously I made this person so nervous that they're just not going to call me. Oh, well, there goes that client. And that was fine. But, it was all about me. A few years later, I ran into another partner from that particular job who said, yeah, we never worked again because they decided not to hold that meeting anymore. So nothing about me at all. Actually, it was all about that particular circumstance and had absolutely nothing to do with how I got sick that day. So some of the reasons that people might not be calling you are completely outside your control or possibly even your experience. Maybe their kids got sick and they forgot about absolutely everything and they've just been focusing on the family at the moment. Maybe the meeting got canceled and they just didn't bother to tell you. Maybe their company is going in a completely different direction, and why would they bother to tell you? Maybe they have a lot of people on their list with your particular language combination, and they think that you are all pretty much equal. Exactly. And they think that you're pretty much equal. And so they give one person the first job, somebody else the second, you get the third, and so on and so forth. And it just takes a while to get around to you. In one of the answers that I'm seeing here also is an agency might just not have work in your combination of languages. I mean, in my case, what with Russian, yeah, that's pretty much true. A lot of my work dried up as of a year ago, as you can possibly imagine. But, it has nothing to do with me. So freelance mentality needs to be reined in. Okay, so that's the second one I wanted to talk about. The third one that I wanted to talk about, which is also something I see a lot, is the why can't clients just do whatever? Or why can't I convince my clients of whatever? Okay. And I'm saying that in an exaggerating question style because basically we're always asking ourselves this question. Now, in this case, it's again still all about you. And you need to remember that the world doesn't revolve around you. It only revolves around you in your world, and your client's world revolves around them. And so what you need to do is stop thinking about yourself. So first of all, why can't I convince my client of whatever is absolutely the wrong question to be asking yourself. The question you can't ask is, how can I convince anybody to do anything? Think about it in the most absurd situation. How could I convince you, whom I've never met before, to marry me? Right? You can't. You can't convince people of anything. And in fact, you can't force an opinion on anybody. All you can do is demonstrate that opinion, show that opinion, and in our case, show it in word pictures, paint a word picture for them, why something is a bad idea or why something is a good idea. For example, why can't I convince my client that working alone is a bad idea? Well, you can't convince them. There's no way you can convince them, but you could possibly paint a word picture as to why it's a bad idea. For example, if this is remote interpreting, even if the job is only 20 minutes long, you could say, well, of course I can do 20 minutes, and that's not a problem for me, and I'd be happy to do it for you. But are you sure you only want me? Because what happens if my internet goes down? Through no fault, obviously, of my own. Because it's, the tree could fall outside because there's a storm. Who knows? I mean, there's nothing I can do about that. What if, something goes down and I'm unable to connect back for the whole 20 minutes, or it takes me a minute to get back? Your meeting grinds to a halt until I can come back into that meeting. Is that satisfactory for you? Are you okay with that? And, then they might think, oh gosh, maybe not. Maybe it would be better to have two people who are geographically spaced out so that their internet connections are always on, and they can, one of them will help if the other one doesn't. So that's a way of painting a word picture for a client to show them why something may not work. Now, you don't want to say it in terms of yourself. For example, I remember certain things coming out, like advertisements coming out or public service announcements coming out when remote interpreting happened, and clients had no idea what an external microphone was or a headphone set or anything like that. And And interpreters were saying, help your interpreter wear a headset, or help your interpreter use an external mic nowadays, because we now know that headsets are not so good. But help us with that. But why would the client want to help you? Again, paint a word picture for them. What I basically would tell clients, and what I've said on podcasts and so on, is, do you want your idea to get across clearly? Of course you do. Well, then you should use an external microphone, because if you listen to somebody who's just talking on the computer microphone, which is nowhere near good enough, you'll give them a headache after a while, because they're going to have to concentrate so hard on what you're saying. Oh, I don't want to give the people listening to me a headache. Okay, I'll use an external microphone. You see how I turn that picture around? Make it be their solution. Exactly. As Jessie says here, and this happens so often, tried to convince a client to hire 2 people for an RSI session and failed. Yeah, well, what you might want to do then is paint that word picture for them in the future to help them out with that. So what you also need to remember is that they are the hero. Again, remember, they are the hero of their lives, of their quest, of anything. So what you are there as, had you ever thought of this before? You are Yoda. Okay, maybe I should do that for the ears instead. You are Yoda. So you are offering Luke in Star Wars the tools and the skills to be able to solve their problem. And so what you need to do is remember, that they have the problem and you are the problem solver. So what you could do is, instead of seeing the client and having that mindset of the client and you are like this, have the mindset that you are a problem solver and that your client is therefore somebody that you're helping to solve their problem. And then you work together to solve the problem. And hopefully the solution that you both come up with together involves you. But definitely work that out. And so this is another issue with the mindset. It isn't necessarily about you. For example, a Geneva translation agency didn't give Manuela any more translations. Their answer was, since they could now use faxes or emails or whatever, they could give the job to a translator based somewhere outside of Geneva, which would be cheaper for them, which isn't really something that you have a lot of control over if you're living in a high expense city like Geneva. You can't charge less. And so that's outside your control. Okay, so that's why can't clients just. This kind of moves me on into a money-making mindset. Now, this one's difficult for a lot of interpreters, especially in the older generation, and I don't want to say oldest or anything like that, but for a very long time, interpreters really like to see themselves as lawyers. Lawyers didn't advertise, way back when. Lawyers did not advertise. Lawyers didn't talk about money. They just, assumed that you knew that they were going to charge a certain amount and that they were expensive. And so therefore, if you turned to a lawyer, you knew what you were going to get. And so people figured, oh, well, we're just like lawyers. If they turn to us, they know what they're going to get. But they don't, right? They really have no idea what they're going to get. And so we have to explain that to them all the time. But at the same time, here we are looking like a professional, trying to be professional, but inside we're full of different self-sabotaging behaviors. Okay, for example, let's pretend we're all translators, okay? And in some countries, like in the United States, you don't need to have a specific sworn translator to do your documents, okay? You can get them done by any translator and then get them notarized, which is fine. In other countries in Europe, for example, you have to have a certain status, you have a stamp, and so on and so forth. We're going to leave that kind of thing out. Somebody comes to you to do a very short document, like a birth certificate. Now, how many words could there be on a birth certificate? 100, maybe? So you're inwardly rolling your eyes and thinking, oh my God, this is such a short document. I'm only going to make maybe 10 euros or $10, maybe 20 if I really push it. I don't know. Yeah, do I want to do this or not? But on the other hand, what you could be thinking is, what are birth certificates needed for? They're needed to get into school, maybe, to prove your citizenship, to get a residency permit in another country, to get married. Okay, this is a super important document to the client. You don't have to charge them 10 euros or $10. You could charge them $100 or $200. Okay, don't gouge the poor person. But the value of this document is so great that you should be charging for the value of what you're doing and not for the physical, oh my God, there's only like $10 worth of work here. Okay, that's a money-making idea. Now, again, don't gouge the poor people, but why are you putting yourself down? And another example, I mean, if you have a contract with a client and the contract specifically states these terms and these conditions and the client has signed it and you have signed it, that means that you both agree to those terms and conditions, right? Okay, so then why, if, for example, they go into overtime and you have a clause in your contract, which I always have, that if you goes over even by a minute, by 10 minutes, whatever, that you will charge the full hour afterwards, and it will be an overtime hour, which is usually time and a half, then why are you worried if you go over by 1 or 5 minutes or 10 minutes that you're charging them for that full hour? Charge them for the hour. It's in the contract. They know about it. They agreed to it, and it's there. Why do you agonize and think, oh my God, I don't, why should I do this? How can I do this? And so on and so forth. It's not a good, look, okay? It's self-sabotaging, and it's full of the mindset of imposter syndrome. I am not where I need to be. And this brings me to my last mindset, which is the self-respect mindset. Okay, now the self-respect mindset means, respect yourself. It means definitely charge what you need to for that document. Definitely charge for that overtime hour. Basically, if you're stuck in imposter syndrome, and this I got from a business consultant that I actually am taking a class from right now, if you're stuck in imposter syndrome, you will never, ever be able to charge like a real professional. And that's sad, because you are a real professional. You are a highly trained, highly specialized, very specific solver of very specific problems. Okay? And that's an attitude that you need to remember. You are that problem solver. You were come to by a client because they have a problem. They don't have all the power. You do. You can choose not to work with them. You can choose to work with them, and under certain conditions. You can choose to solve their problem or decide that that problem is not part of your solutions. So for example, if somebody were going to come to me and say, oh, we're having a literary evening with Russian poets, we'd love to have you interpret. That is so not my problem, okay? I could pass that on to I don't know how many interpreters who are really good at that. I am not good at literature interpretation. And I can't imagine a worse nightmare than interpreting somebody's translation into English of a Russian poem back into Russian for the poet when I've never read the poem. It's just not going to happen. So I would pass that one on. On the other hand, if they were to come to me and say, oh my God, we need somebody who's really good with nuclear, can you do nuclear and stuff? Yeah, that's so me. That is a problem that I choose to solve. So remember that you are a professional, a highly trained, highly specialized professional. And that is something that you need to make sure to show in every aspect of how you're talking to your client. So for example, let's say you get a job and you've talked to the client and you've convinced, you've painted beautiful word pictures for them to show them that you are actually the best solution for this particular job in this particular circumstance because, I don't know, you do nuclear, or because you do literature and I don't, whatever. But you've convinced them that you really know your stuff. And so you've charged them, 10, 20, 50, 100% more than any other interpreter would charge for that particular job because you're such a highly trained specialist in that job, right? Then you get a better offer. You get to work, instead of for 2 days, you get to work for 5 days at that same rate, right? With a former client who has already been, shown that you are the best at what you do. And so you decide you're going to give up the first job and go with the second one. And the first job, you then say, oh, well, I have somebody else for you who will take my place. Well, the client for that first job will hate you, first of all, because you just showed them, you painted these amazing word pictures about why you are their perfect solution for this particular situation, right? And now you're saying, well, you could use this other person. No matter what you say, even if you say, look, this person is even better than I am at whatever it is, at literature or whatever, they're even better than I am. It doesn't matter. They hired you for your personality, for your word pictures, for your abilities, and they're paying you X% more than they would have paid any other interpreter. And suddenly you're putting in somebody else. Well, if you're treating you're treating yourself as if you are interchangeable with somebody else, then you're interchangeable in their minds. And that means you've just trained a client, A, not to go for higher rates because who cares? And B, you are interchangeable. You are not the person that they need desperately. They can go with anybody. And so next time they'll just call anybody. So you need to stand by what you're telling people. You need to respect yourself. And if you get a former client calling and saying, I need you these days, you can say, I'm really sorry. I'm already working for somebody. And if they say, but we really need you, you can say, yes, and so do they. And at this point, would you want me to abandon you if I had already agreed to work with you? No. So you can say, maybe I can do a couple of the days for you. Maybe I can find a team for you, in which case you still get paid, right? Because you're organizing and so on. But treat yourself with respect and make sure you do that to the client to show the client that you are worthy of that respect. Because otherwise you're undermining their respect for not just yourself, but for the rest of us as well. Okay, so that's the last mindset that I really wanted to talk about. I'm going to go over my usual 30 minutes by just a few. I hope that's okay with you, but you can always leave and come back and watch us on replay if you want to. I have a couple of comments from some people. Even though I have overtime in the contract, a lot of clients still complain about it, that they should know. You could include in your contract that you're happy to call them at the time when the overtime kicks in and they can let you know not to continue, in which case you'll be happy to walk away from the mic. That is their choice. And same thing when I charge when they hire me and they don't use me. Yeah, that's happened to me a lot as well. If you were there, then they obviously know they have to pay you. And if you aren't being, it's in your contract. So they agreed to that contract. And if they don't understand what the contract says, then, it's sad for them, but they agreed to these particular terms. And you might bring that up in the beginning, when you're talking to them. Well, are you sure that you need to hire me? Because if you don't need to hire me, then don't. But if you do hire me, you will be paying me for that time. And so you are an insurance policy for them. Do keep that in mind. So that's the self-respect thing as well. And so there you go. Those are the 5 types of self-respect that I wanted, of mindsets that I wanted to talk about here today. And so now I'd like to tell you about what we're going to do. Let's see. And that's it. So before we get to the top tip, what I wanted to do is let you know that our next show will be on March 4th. And the show will be with a guest again. And we will be discussing consultant interpreters and who they are and what they do, and maybe even how you can get to work for some of them. Our guest will be Peter Sand. And Peter Sand is a consultant interpreter in Geneva who works a lot with Geneva-based large organizations and so on. And he's very kind enough to come on for next month. So that will be on March 4th at 4 p.m. So consultant interpreters. And so make sure to send in your questions ahead of time so I can get the show ready. Now, along with that, I'd also like to let you know about just a couple of opportunities for CPD, as I talked about, and a chance to exercise that growth mindset that you have. So first of all, I'm giving my Smart Consecutive Interpreting class again at the end of this month on February 25th and 26th. If you want the flyer, please put a 6 in the comments and I'll send that out to you. Another thing is that I'll be speaking at the Innovation in Interpreting Summit on March 8th. So the summit is 3 days. I'm going to be speaking on March 8th, and I'll be taking a short but very deep dive on fostering connections on LinkedIn. And the third CPD opportunity that is available is the Cambridge Conference Interpretation course. We're open for enrollment. Our working languages this year are English, French, German, Italian, Russian, and Spanish. If you're interested, please write in, because if we don't get enough applications or enrollments for all of the languages, we're going to cut 1 or 2 of them if we don't have them in the next couple of months. So we tend to follow where our demand leads, actually. So today's top tip, and before I get to that, actually, I see that that Lilia is asking something. If you tell the client that you're already booked, but you can send someone else you trust, in that way you're also telling them that you're replaceable, which is not quite true, because in this particular instance, Lilia, if you tell the client that you're already booked and they say, oh my God, I don't know what to do, you can still say, look, I can come in and do some of the job. I mean, if you can. If you can't, you can't. But I can get together a team that I trust and that I will brief on everything that they need to know about working with you. Okay? So that you will have the best possible replacement for me for this particular job. I realize it's not going to be me. It won't be my personality, my shiny smile, or anything like that. But I mean, don't go quite overboard. But it's a valid way of going, and you're solving their problem for them. Obviously, you would only recommend somebody that you trust, so that if the client were to call them back, they would say, oh, but I worked for Lilia that time, or I worked for Julia, or whoever. You should call them first. Okay, so that's how I handle it. Great, I'm glad I answered that one. So our top tip today, let me just get down to that. And our top tip is a quote from Lao Tzu. And this was sent in by the person who I noted earlier is here and said hello, and who I've never heard your name actually pronounced, so I'm not going to mangle it on screen. But if you want to say hi now, I can put you up on screen at the end of the top tip so that people will see who the wise person was who put this in. And this is a quote from Lao Tzu. So, watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. And watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Okay? This is really very true. It's very, very true, because whatever thoughts you have, they're going to determine what your actions are. So anytime you catch yourself in negative self-talk, oh my God, I'm a terrible interpreter. How could anybody hire me? Or, oh my God, how can I charge them all this money for just 5 minutes overtime or anything like that? Stop. Take a breath. Take a step back from what you're saying to yourself. Look at it. Realize that it's just negative thinking on your part, that it really doesn't reflect the world as it is. And remember that you are just fine as you are. You are doing a fine job, and you are exactly where you're supposed to be. Thank you so much for tuning in today on Mindset. I'd like to thank again the colleague who put that quote into a LinkedIn post, because it was beautiful. And I'd like to thank you for having joined me today. I look forward to seeing you next month. Remember, March 4th, to talk with Peter Sand on consulting interpreting. And maybe I'll see you at the Smart Consecutive class. I hope so. Thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you then. These are getting out of this sometimes, it just takes so many clicks. Bye.